As quilters, we love fabric. They're beautiful. They're gorgeous. They feel fabulous just to touch them and to put them together and come up with a wonderful idea, a pattern, a design that you want to do. And as quilters, that's what we enjoy, and that's what keeps us going back for more and more, and sometimes even more. But there, every once in a while, is a piece of fabric that we don't quite know what to do with. Now, this is not something that you bought specifically and came home and said, oh no, what do I have? This is more like you bought a collection and maybe there are a few pieces in there that aren't quite your style. Maybe it's something that's a little out of your color range. But you know, there is still a way to use it, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and I am anxious to show you what I have done with my pile of quirky fabric. Yes, they're beautiful in and of themselves, but I didn't know what to do with them. They're just outside of my box, and so I found a way to resolve that and to bring those pieces into a beautiful quilt. So first we'll take a look at them, then we'll take a look at what to do with them, and finally, actually in the next video, I'm going to show you the beautiful quilt that results from these crazy quirky fabrics. So stick around and watch. I'm anxious to show this to you. Thanks for being here. Oh, and please don't forget to subscribe. I'd love to have you following along. Do you have some fabrics that you're not quite sure what to do with? They're either not the color that you like, or the print is something you're not sure how to deal with, or maybe it's all the above. Maybe it's all the colors. Maybe it's the busy print and so much going on. What do you do with fabrics like these? And these are all fat quarters that I purchased within a set or a curated bundle. And they're all very nice. There's nothing wrong with these, but I just didn't quite know how to use them or what I wanted to do with them. Now, these in particular are purple. That's not a bad thing, but it's not on the top of my list. Purples are not something I work with a lot, but any one of these in a 5-inch square is going to look really nice in a quilt. And so I thought, all right, what I need to do is create some 5-inch squares out of my fat quarters. So I started looking through, and check it out. Look at that. So this one sort of hindered me and said, no, I don't think I want to go there. It's dark and I don't see the bright color I want. But boy, I opened that up and look at that. It's beautiful. Look at these great colors. So when this is cut into 5-inch squares or charms, that's going to be a beautiful piece. Now this butterfly I've seen in a lot of colors and I love it. But again, this was the outside that I looked at, and open that up and look at that great bright yellow with the russet colors. And then we get here with the blues and the fuchsia and some greens. So again, here we go, our 5-inch square. They're going to be beautiful. And this one too, it's got some great fall colors, that gold and green and the russet with the darker greens kind of mixed in there. I think that's really pretty. And again, on a small scale, in a small portion, I think it's going to look really nice. Now this baby just screams out, and there's nothing about this not being bright, that's for sure. It almost looks like crystals in there, but there's just so much of it. I just sort of tended to stay away from it, and I thought, you know, I'm going to cut this down, put this into 5-inch squares, and there's some great colors here. And I'm just showing you these because I want you to take a closer look at your fabrics. What do they look like all over? Now this is really pretty. It makes me think of, like, you know, Christmas tree decorations, but it's a pretty motif. I like the dots against the darker background, some bright colors, and there's some pretty orange down here. There's a lot that you can do with different fabrics that you might not otherwise want to use in its entirety. You may not want to use an entire yard of one of these, but that doesn't mean you can't use bits of it here and there to brighten up a quilt. Look at that. I love that. The turquoise and that great hot pink and some purple and blue, and there's some really wonderful colors in here. And these are kind of in the monochromatic, not unlike some of these purples. And that's fine. It's going to work out well. And then this was kind of dark on its own. But see that blue? If I get the right colors in there, that blue is going to pop. So that brought me to my next step, which is a background or lattice or fabric that I'm going to use in conjunction with this. And I wanted something that has a lot of color in it that will really stand out, yet not really clash with this because there's a lot going on right here. And at first I brought this one out. I like this because it has my blue, and there's not much blue in here. This is the only one that really has much blue, and it's very subdued. But I love the blues and the turquoises, and because this has all these sort of hot colors, the bright colors that we saw in a lot of these batiks, the pink, the purple, the yellow, green, blue, it's all right there. And if this were done on a smaller scale, and I'm thinking about that confetti quilt that I've made, it would be perfect to put these together that way. And I like it, but then I found something else that I think I like even better. This overall color cut in 5-inch squares would be cut into a smaller unit, into a smaller square, and it might be a little too much. But here's another thought. It's almost the same fabric with the multicolor. It has all the colors in here. I know it opens somewhere. And look at that. If I were to cut these into 5-inch squares and then cut them down into the smaller squares, this would be great. What a wonderful accent for these fat quarters. And the thing that I like between these two, why I would choose this, these colors just blend across, and it's just, one color to the next. Because this has that common dot, this little speckly dot that goes across the whole thing, it sort of ties the colors together. And while you still have the bright pops of color, this tones down the vibrancy of it. You still get that great saturation of color, but it doesn't so much scream off the fabric like this one might. And because these are going to be doing a lot of screaming, I don't want this to scream too. I want this to be a little more subdued, though it's still filled and saturated with some great color. So I think this is going to work out well. It's a lot, but I'm going to use some white in the background because a lot of these have creamy white bits in there, and it'll sort of pull out these lighter dots. And I think that's going to work well to kind of balance everything together. So here we are. I am going to cut these fat quarters. What do we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 of them. I'm going to cut them into 5-inch squares. Now each fat quarter will give me 12 5-inch squares plus a 3-inch strip, a 3 by, I think, probably 21.5 inches, however wide they are. And that's going to be perfect. Now, I'm not going to use all those fat quarters. I'll probably take 1 or 2 of each, mix it in with some other ones, and then put the rest of these in my 5-inch pile. I have quite a stack going. And it's great because when I go to make a quilt, I have all these pre-cut 5-inch squares that are ready to go. And that's why I love fat quarters, because I can use them in so many different ways. I can cut them down into a multitude of sizes. And that's something else that I do want to show you. And I'll pull some of these aside and get them cut so you can see. But for now, this is where we are. I have some great fabrics selected. Let me get them cut, and I'm going to show you what the final color collection is going to be, and we'll get started on making a quilt. I love collecting fat quarters. They are my favorite pre-cut. I can get a lot out of a fat quarter. Overall, I like the versatility of having a large collection of fat quarters because it allows me to put together colors that I like. And particularly when I'm using batiks, I love mixing a lot of batiks together, and fat quarters just give me a bit more flexibility, actually quite a bit more flexibility to create what I want. What I'll do when I get my fat quarters is I'll look at them a while. Sometimes I have an idea and I'm going to use larger pieces, but generally I'm going to use a smaller piece. There's no pattern I can think of that says use an entire fat quarter intact. Generally, we're going to cut it in some manner. Now, when I know I'm going to cut a fat quarter, I'm going to stack it, and I have 5 different fabrics here that I am going to cut at one time. And what I do is cut it into 5 and or 10-inch squares. And then once I've done that, I have about a 3-inch strip across the top that I can leave as is or cut into a 2.5 inch. So I'm getting all 3 of those most popular sizes that I need. Now I am going to include my cutting template below. This is specifically for 5-inch block because that's what I'm going to be using in most of my patterns, but I'm going to show along the way what some of the other options are. So the first thing I do is I line up my fat quarters nice and even. What I do is I start in one corner, and for me it's this lower corner down here. I run all my 18-inch lengths along this side. I line up this point, and then I run an even line across here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is trim this edge up. The other thing I do on this edge down here, pull this up a little bit. Notice how they're not perfectly straight. This one actually has an arch in it. It starts high, it goes low. That's not uncommon. The first thing I'm going to do is line up this side. I want one nice, perfectly straight edge to work from. And so I'm going to do that. And you can do it from your salvage edge or the opposite. Now, I brought this edge closest to me, just below that line. So this is going to be my cutting line, and I'm going to make sure this is below that line because I'm going to have to trim that to make it even. But I'm not going to do that just yet. The first thing I'm going to do is consider what I'm going to cut. And I'm either going to cut 5-inch blocks 3 times, which will take me 15 inches, or a 10-inch block and a 5-inch block. And either way, that's going to take me up to my 15. So I know if I come up here to 15, I can get my 3 5s or I can get a 10 and a 5. Make sure you're at 15 inches. Remember, measure twice, cut once. That way, you're going to have less potential problems. This can become a 2.5-inch width right there. And just always think about the size fabric that you have, what you can do with it. So now I know I'm going to go 20 inches across. I can go ahead and cut my 5, 10 across and cut these into shorter strips. But what I prefer to do first is cut this long strip off at my 20 inches. So I've got, let's see, 5, 10, 15, and 20. Again, keep counting, make sure you're on track. And then when I cut this piece off, I now have some longer strips that I can use. And this can be done, can be used for scrap quilting. Anything less than 1 inch I'm not going to use. That's a bit questionable. But you know what? It's great to tie a gift bag closed. So there's always a use for some little piece of fabric. So when I'm cutting, I just put everything aside in a pile, and then I'll sort through it later with what I'm going to do. Now let's do one more cut here. And I'm going to do this up at the top. I'm going to recut at 15 inches because remember, this is my bottom edge that wasn't completely even. I had a few pieces that were cut a bit crooked, a little wonky, and I'm just going to come in and clean up that edge. Just like this. And there's not much that needed to come off just over here. And now we're good. So now what we're going to do is we can cut this at 10, and you can get 2 10-inch blocks. I tend to use the 5-inch more, and that's what I'm going to cut. And I'm going to cut this so everything stays in place nicely. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. I'm going to lift this and bring it down. And I'm going to put it on the next 5-inch mark. Okay, now I'm going to layer 2. So I have my 20 inches, which means I'm going to get 4 charm squares. Keeps your ruler nice and straight. And let's see, we're going to get this one, and we're going to get this one, and our last one. So it doesn't take long at all to cut your fabrics. And then what I'll do is I'll use what I'm going to use and decide what I'm going to do with it. And then anything extra I add to my 5-inch pile. So that's how you cut your fat quarter. That's how you get all these wonderful pre-cut fabrics from your own fat quarters. So if you're like me and you like to buy a lot of fabric and collect it, make it usable. Cut it into pieces, into sizes that will work best for you. What do you use a lot when you quilt? Think about that. And then come up with a plan and go ahead and get started cutting. And then that way you're going to be more apt to use it. So make sure you check out my link below that has my chart for cutting fat quarters, but there's also a conversion chart specific to charm squares or 5-inch squares, how many that you need for certain quilts, because a charm pack generally has 42 squares in it. Well, how much will that get you? What if I want to make it bigger? What if I want to use 3 charm packs? That way the math is all done for you and you're good to go. So you're ready now to go ahead and cut your fat quarters into pre-cut sizes. Get started and get quilting. Thanks so much for being here. This has been fun sharing with you. Have a great day. Oh, don't forget, please subscribe.